Okay. Okay. Let me get in the zone, people. Here we go. Chapter 4. Lessons from one field can often teach us something important about unrelated fields. Take the billion-year history of ice ages and what they teach us about growing your money. Our scientific knowledge of Earth is younger than you might think. Understanding how the world works often involves drilling deep below its surface, something we haven't been able to do until fairly recently. Isaac Newton calculated the movement of the stars hundreds of years before we understood some of the basics of our planet. It was not until the 19th century that scientists agreed that Earth had, on multiple occasions, been covered in ice. There was too much evidence to argue otherwise. All over the world sat fingerprints of a previously frozen world. Huge boulders strewn in random locations, rock beds scraped down to thin layers. Evidence became clear that there had not been one ice age, but 5 distinct ones we could measure. The amount of energy needed to freeze the planet, melt it anew, and freeze it over yet again is staggering. What on earth, literally, could be causing these cycles? It must be the most powerful force on our planet. And it was. Just not in the way anyone expected. There were plenty of theories about why the ice ages occurred. To account for their enormous geological influence, the theories were equally grand. The uplifting of mountain ranges, it was thought, may have shifted the Earth's winds enough to alter the climate. Others favored the idea that ice was the natural state, interrupted by massive volcanic eruptions that warmed us up. But none of these theories could account for the cycle of ice ages. The growth of mountain ranges or some massive volcano may explain one ice age, but it could not explain the cyclical repetition of 5. In the early 1900s, a Serbian scientist named Milutin Milankovic studied the Earth's position relative to other planets and came up with the theory of ice ages that we now know is accurate. The gravitational pull of the sun and moon gently affect the Earth's motion and tilt toward the sun. During parts of this cycle, which can last tens of thousands of years, each of the Earth's hemispheres gets a little more or a little less solar radiation than they're used to. And that is where the fun begins. Milankovitch's theory initially assumed that. Hold on, give me a second. His name is throwing me off. Milankovitch's theory initially assumed that a tilt of the Earth's hemispheres caused ravenous winters cold enough to turn the planet into ice. But a Russian meteorologist named Vladimir Kopin dug deeper into Milankovitch's work and discovered a fascinating nuance. Moderately cool summers, not cold winters, were the icy culprit. It begins when a summer never gets warm enough to melt the previous winter's snow. The leftover ice base makes it easier for snow to accumulate and the following winter, which increases the odds of snow sticking around in the following summer, which attracts even more accumulation the following winter. Perpetual snow reflects more of the sun's rays, which exacerbates cooling, which brings more snowfall, and on and on. Within a few hundred years, a seasonal snowpack grows into a continental ice sheet, and you're off to the races. The same thing happens in reverse. An orbital tilt letting more sunlight in melts more of the winter snowpack, which reflects less light the following years, which increases temperatures, which prevents more snow the next year, and so on. That's the cycle that's the cycle. The amazing thing here is how big something can grow from a relatively small change in conditions. You start with a thin layer of snow left over from a cool summer that no one would think anything of, and then, in a geological blink of an eye, the entire Earth is covered in miles thick ice. As glaciologist Gwen Schultz put it, it is not necessarily the amount of snow that causes ice sheets, but the fact that snow, however little, lasts. The big takeaway from ice ages is that you don't need tremendous force to create tremendous results. If something compounds, if a little growth wait, serves as the fuel for future growth, a small starting base can lead to results so extraordinary they seem to defy logic. It can be so logic defying that you underestimate what's possible, where growth comes from and what it can lead to. And so it is with money. More than 2,000 books are dedicated to how Warren Buffett built his fortune. Many of them are wonderful, but few pay enough attention to the simplest fact. Buffett's fortune isn't due to just being a good investor, but being a good investor since he was literally a child. As I write this, Warren Buffett's net worth is $84.5 billion. Of that, $84.2 billion was accumulated after his 50th birthday. $81.5 billion came after he qualified for Social Security in his mid-60s. Warren Buffett is a phenomenal investor, but you miss a key point if you attach all of his successes to investing acumen. The real key to his success is that he's been a phenomenal investor for 3/4 of a century. Had he started investing in his 30s and retired in his 60s, few people would have heard of him. Consider a little thought experiment. Buffett began seriously investing when he was 10 years old. By the time he was 30, he had a net worth of $1 million, or $9.3 million adjusted for inflation. What if he was a more normal person, spending his teens and 20s exploring the world and finding his passion, and by age 30 his net worth was, say, $25,000? And let's say he still went on to earn the extraordinary annual investment returns he's been able to generate, which is 22% annually, which is crazy, by the way. Stop complaining, Loki. But quit investing and retired at age 60 to play golf and spend time with his grandkids. What would a rough estimate of his net worth be today? Not $84.5 billion. It would be $11.9 million. 99.9% less than his actual net worth. Effectively, all of Warren Buffett's financial success can be tied to the financial base he built in his pubescent years and the longevity he maintained in his geriatric years. His skill is investing, but his secret is time. That's how compounding works. Think of this another way. Buffett is the richest investor of all time, but he's not actually the greatest. At least not when measured by average annual returns. Jim Simons, head of the hedge fund Renaissance Technology, has compounded money at 66% annually since 1988. No one comes close to this record. As we just saw, Buffett has compounded at roughly 22% annually, a third as much. Simon's net worth, as I write, is $21 billion. He is, and I know how ridiculous this sounds given the numbers we're dealing with, 75% less rich than Buffett. Why the difference? If Simmons is such a better investor, why the difference if Simons, is it Simmons? Simons? Does anybody know? Whatever. I'm gonna just say Simons, because there's no, if Simons is such a better investor, because Simons did not find his investment stride until he was 50 years old. He's had less than half as many years to compound as Buffett. If James Simons had earned his 66% annual returns for the 70-year span Buffett had built his wealth, he would be worth, please hold your breath, 63 quintillion, 900 quadrillion, 781 trillion, 780 billion, $748,160,000. Write that down. These are ridiculous, impractical numbers. The point is that what seems like small changes in growth assumptions can lead to ridiculous, impractical numbers. And so when we are studying why something got to become as powerful as it has, why an ice age formed, or why Buffett is so rich, We often overlook the key drivers of success. I have heard many people say the first time they saw a compound interest table or one of those stories about how much you'd have for retirement if you began saving in your 20s versus your 30s changed their life. But it actually didn't. What it actually did was surprise them because the results intuitively didn't seem right. Linear thinking is so much more intuitive than exponential thinking. If I ask you to calculate 8 plus 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 8 in your head, you can do it in a few seconds. It's 72. If I ask you to calculate 8 times 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 8 in your head, it would explode. It's 134,217,728, just so you know. IBM made a 3.5 megabyte hard drive in the 1950s. By the 1960s, things were moving into a few dozen megabytes. By the 1970s, IBM's Winchester drive held 70 megabytes. Then drives got exponentially smaller in size with more storage. A typical PC in early 1990s held 200 to 500 megabytes. And then, wham, things exploded. In 1999, Apple's iMac comes up with a 6 gigabyte hard drive. In 2003, 120 gigs on the Power Mac. In 2006, 250 gigs on the new iMac. In 2011, the first 4 terabyte hard drive was created. In 2017, we hit 60 terabyte hard drives, and in 2019, we hit the 100 terabyte hard drives, which is crazy to me. I think that's crazy how fast we got there. Put all that together, from 1950 to 1990, we gained 296 megabytes. From 1990 through today, we gained 100 million megabytes. If you were a technology optimist in the 1950s, you may have predicted that the practical storage would become 1,000 times larger, maybe 10,000 times larger. If you were swinging for the fences, few would have said 30 million times larger within my lifetime. But that's what happened. The counterintuitive nature of compounding leads even the smartest of us to overlook its power. In 2004, Bill Gates criticized the new Gmail, wondering why anyone would need a gigabyte of storage. Author Stephen Levy wrote, despite his currency with cutting-edge technologies, his mentality was anchored in the old paradigm of storage being a commodity that must be conserved. You never get accustomed to how quickly things can grow. The danger here is that when compounding isn't intuitive, we often ignore its potential and focus on solving problems through other means. Not because we're overthinking, but because we rarely stop to consider compounding potential. None of the 2,000 books picking apart Buffett's success are titled, "This guy has been investing consistently for 3/4 of a century," but we know that's the key to the majority of his success. It's just hard to wrap your head around that math because it's not intuitive. There are books on economic cycles, trading strategies, and sector bets, but the most powerful and important book should be called Shut Up and Wait. It's just one page with a long-term chart of economic growth. The practical takeaway is that the counterintuitiveness of compounding may be responsible for the majority of disappointing trades and bad strategies, and successful investing attempts. You can't blame people for devoting all their effort in what they learn and what they do, to trying to earn the highest investment returns. It intuitively seems like the best way to get rich. But good investing isn't necessarily about earning the highest returns, because the highest returns tend to be one-off hits that can't be repeated. It's about earning pretty good returns that you can stick with, which can be repeated for the longest period of time. That's when compounding runs wild. The opposite of this, earning huge returns that can't be held on to, leads to some tragic stories. We'll need the next chapter to tell them. Okay, chapter 5 is called Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy. Good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. It is currently 8:30. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Oh my gosh, DM me that too. You always send me such good. This has a lot of pages. I don't read that fast. I'm not going to read this one today. Or not right now. But sometime this week, I definitely do need to go through and read more than one chapter and catch up. Like, we got to get to chapter 10 by, like, Friday. Something's got to happen. I got to start reading 2 chapters, wake up earlier, start the live earlier. Who knows what needs to happen, but it needs to happen. Now, we also have our second book that we're reading right now, which this is also inside of my, what's-a-majigger. You know what it's called. What's that thing? It's inside of my, showcase as well. So I cannot add the Psychology of Money to the stream, but I can add the 44 Laws of Peace to the stream. That's what this is. Most people don't know that this book exists, and you know, it's understandable that most people don't know that this book exists. But this book is kind of hits. So last week, our first law was to be present. I will be making a video about the first law this week, but you know, they're late. So the second law says, strive to understand, not debate. Debate can be a healthy activity if you are engaging with someone who is open to reflecting on ideas with which they disagree. Unfortunately, most people are uncomfortable being challenged and, despite the best of logic, tighten their grip on their beliefs when threatened. This type behavior makes for a useless interaction, a lot of talking and no listening. Instead, work to understand where the person is coming from, especially if it's a friend or a family member. For some, it's hard to listen to someone they disagree with without trying to convince that person of their own opinion. They must let you know that they are right and you are wrong, because otherwise it's a thankless way of engaging in conversations. No gotchas or I told you so's to feed their ego. And so tiny disagreements turn into huge arguments that could have been avoided if just one person works to understand the other. There is no need to debate over every disagreement. Pick your battles wisely. Most disagreements are over trivial matters that you don't need to fight to the death over. Instead of convincing someone that they're wrong, work to understand their thought process. Suspend your bias and try to see things from another person's reasoning. Besides, if you are confident in your own reasoning, then there is no need to feel threatened when disagreed with. In fact, it presents an opportunity to test and strengthen your logic. Understand, if your goal is to convince someone of your position, you've already lost because most can't be convinced they're wrong. Your goal then should be to understand their position. I mean, can you even be sure they're wrong without first understanding their reasoning? Go a step further and come together where you connect, and you will have won 2 times over. First, in better understanding your friend, and second, in keeping your sanity. Realize, too, that we are all guilty of being hard-headed at one time or another. Think about this the next time you're in a disagreement with someone. It's possible that you're the one being hard-headed. So, law number 2, strive to understand, not debate. Law number 1, be present. I'm a read the name for law 3. Law 3 says, listen to listen. Yo, what's up, everybody? Hi. This is the book that we got in our showcase. This is the book that we got. Thank you, Moreno. Thank you for the follow. Thank you for the likes. Welcome in. But yeah,